After my elder brother passed away, my sister-in-law ran away and I raised my niece until she became an adult. After my niece was admitted to a 985 university, my sister-in-law came to recognize their relationship. The two hugged and cried, but then turned around and accused me of driving a wedge between the mother and daughter. Later, when I was sick and urgently needed to pay the fee, my niece took all my money and ran away with her biological mother. I was left alone in the hospital waiting to die. If I could have another chance, I returned to the day my elder brother died. My mother fainted several times in front of the mourning hall. The black and white portrait on the table was taken when the village collectively collected 1-inch photos a year ago. Because the pixels were not high, it looked a bit blurry. My sister-in-law held the newly born niece without saying a word. When I walked over, she avoided looking at me. "Sister, hold chin-chin for me. I still have something to do inside the room." The niece was probably hungry and cried loudly. I watched coldly and guessed what she was going to do next. In the previous life, after she handed the child to me, she hurriedly went to the room to steal my elder brother's pension and then left. If I could have another chance, of course, I wouldn't let such a thing happen again. "Sister-in-law, I'm still busy. You take care of the child yourself." My elder brother's body wasn't cold yet, but at this moment, she was thinking about how to run away. There were ingots burning in the copper basin in front of the mourning hall, and the ashes slowly rose. Finally, they fell on my mother's grizzled hair. Remembering the previous life, she used all kinds of means to make me raise my niece. In the end, she even ruined my marriage. The last bit of pity in my heart vanished. My mother held my hand and wailed. "And your elder brother is gone like this. What should Mom do? For the rest of my life, I'm relying on you. You are the pillar of this family." While speaking, I saw my sister-in-law quietly put the child on the ground and sneak into the bedroom alone. I didn't stop her. 10 minutes later, she rushed out and made a big fuss. "Who took my husband's pension?" "A full 200,000 yuan. Then she stared at me viciously. "And was it you? In this family, only you could do such a thing." As soon as my mother heard that the pension was gone, she got up from the ground with a swift move. "What? Your elder brother's pension is gone? Where did it go?" She pulled my arm and shouted loudly, "You girl, why are you so wild? That was the money your elder brother left for me to live on." When my sister-in-law heard this, she wasn't happy. "Mom, what do you mean by living money?" "That was the money my husband left for me and the child." The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law had never gotten along well, and they started arguing with each other after just a few words. The niece was crying loudly on the side, and no one coaxed her. I found a chair and sat down to watch them quarrel. In the end, my mother lost due to exhaustion. My sister-in-law turned into a table-clearing master and smashed the offerings in front of the mourning hall to pieces. Just when she was about to smash my elder brother's portrait, I spoke. "The money is with me." She quickly grasped the key words and rushed over in one step. "What? The money is with you? Hand over the money obediently." I looked at the portrait in front of the mourning hall and remembered all kinds of things about my elder brother before his death. That year, he gave up the opportunity to go to university and worked to support my studies. He went to work on a construction site thousands of miles away alone and never complained even when he was tired or sick. After supporting me, he earned money to save for the bride price, got married, and had a child. Unexpectedly, not long after having a good life, he lost his life due to a construction site accident. Before he died, he said to me with his last breath, "Sister, elder brother has no ability. I just hope my daughter can grow up safely." In the previous life, it was precisely because of this sentence that I did my best to raise my niece. But I never thought I would end up with a tragic death myself. I picked up the incense burner on the ground and burned 3 sticks of incense for my elder brother again. I murmured in my heart, "Elder brother, I'm sorry. This time I'm going to break my promise." My sister-in-law pushed me to the ground. "And don't think I don't know what you're thinking. You know a few words and have more culture than me, so you want to keep this money for yourself." I looked at my niece who was crying so hard on the ground and said coldly, "I have entrusted a lawyer to notarize the money. The 3 of you are all first-in-line heirs, and the money will be distributed according to the inheritance order at that time." At this moment, my sister-in-law developed her mathematical talent. "Then wouldn't I only get more than 60,000 yuan?" My mother also followed closely and said, "You dead girl. Why did you do this? In this life, the best way for me to completely get rid of these two people is to make them restrain each other. Because after my sister-in-law ran away last time, my mother directed all her conflicts towards me. She came to my workplace to make a big fuss and forced me to resign and go home. Using my only bit of guilt towards my elder brother, she forced me to raise my niece and support her in her old age. And I completely gave up my life to fulfill them. If I could have another chance, I swear I will never repeat the same mistakes. Sister-in-law, Mom, don't argue anymore. Ching also accounts for 1/3 of the property. Whoever raises her can get 130,000 yuan. I'll give some money to Ching's guardian as a token of my kindness as the younger sister-in-law. As soon as they heard that there was money for raising the child, the two women immediately started arguing. I'm the child's biological mother. Ching has to follow me. I'm still the biological grandmother. This is the blood of our family. My sister-in-law was young and strong and was quicker. She picked up her daughter from the ground first. My mother was not willing to show weakness either. She lay on the ground and rolled around, saying that my sister-in-law was going to cut off the family line of our family. For a moment, the mourning hall was very lively. My mother immediately got up from the ground and hugged my sister-in-law's leg. Ching is the family line of our family. If you dare to take her away, I won't let you go. The two of them were arguing non-stop in front of the mourning hall. A gust of cold wind blew, scattering the ashes of the ingots in front of the mourning hall. Everyone felt a chill on their backs and a coldness. The black and white photo in front of the mourning hall suddenly fell on the table with a clang. My mother trembled and said, "Your elder brother. Your elder brother has shown his spirit." In such a small rural place, all strange and supernatural phenomena are regarded as manifestations of the spirit. This was just a gust of summer wind passing through the hall. Only those with a guilty conscience would feel scared. Fortunately, after such a commotion, the two of them woke up. I straightened the photo and said calmly, "Let's finish the funeral first." Only then did the two of them calm down and finish the funeral properly. After the 7th day of my elder brother's death, all the valuable things at home were sold by my sister-in-law. Because Ching had no milk to drink, she was crying from hunger. My sister-in-law threatened me, "If you don't give me money, I won't care about the life or death of this little brat." She was really cruel enough to let the child starve and ignore her. My mother originally thought that the granddaughter was a burden and didn't want to care either. Remembering the previous life, I worked hard to raise my niece until she grew up, but she still turned to her mother. A white-eyed wolf can't be fed well, so I didn't want to care either. If you don't settle the matter of your elder brother's inheritance, this child might as well starve to death. My mother also said unwillingly, "Yes, I'm already 50 years old. The pension must be in place first, otherwise I won't care either." The family was poor, and both of them were eyeing the 200,000 yuan, and neither of them was willing to back down. I smiled and looked at my niece in the swaddling clothes who was so skinny from hunger, feeling ridiculous in my heart. It cost more than 200,000 yuan to raise her to adulthood in the previous life. In this life, because of this money, neither her mother nor her grandmother is willing to raise her. Well, then let her starve to death. I replied coldly. My sister-in-law rushed over and grabbed my arm. "You quickly ask the lawyer to come. Ching will be raised by me. I need to get more money. Otherwise, I'll go to your workplace to make trouble." My mother followed closely and said, "Let's divide the money first. Other things are not important." The village committee director on the side also persuaded. "And you, with the situation of your family, it's not a good thing to be stalemated like this. It's better to distribute your elder brother's inheritance first." I looked at the two women in front of me. My sister-in-law and my mother each had their own ulterior motives. "Okay, let's divide the money first." According to the law, the 200,000 yuan was divided into three. 66,000 yuan for the niece was kept by the village committee and returned to the guardian in 6 years. My sister-in-law beamed with joy, hugged her daughter and immediately started breastfeeding. After all, it's the mother who loves the child. My daughter must be with me. In this poor small mountain village where the average annual income is less than 10,000 yuan, 10,000 yuan is also a large sum of money. My mother muttered, "All the money of your elder brother was wasted by this fox spirit. I, as a mother, have suffered a big loss. This is the best way I can think of to restrain my sister-in-law for now. At least in these 6 years, she will raise the child for the sake of the money. After my elder brother's funeral, I packed my things and returned to work in the provincial capital. Because of my excellent working ability, I soon met my boyfriend Shen Yu through the introduction of the leader of my unit. In the previous life, my boyfriend not only accepted that I raised my little niece but also treated her as his own. But in the end, he couldn't withstand the pressure from his family and broke up with me. I can understand Shen Yu's choice. I just regret that we had fate but no destiny. Now thinking about it, I was really too stupid at that time. I was willing to give up my own marriage for raising a white-eyed wolf. In this life, after I confessed everything to Shen Yu and promised that my original family would not affect our relationship. The Shen family is also a family of highly educated people. The parents are reasonable. Although they were not satisfied with my background, they still tacitly approved. Just like this, we were scheduled to get married after the new year. But I never expected that at this critical moment, something happened at home. When the village director called me, I was choosing wedding dresses with Shen Yu. And you, come back quickly. Your mother and your sister-in-law fought and were admitted to the hospital. Now the police are here and are mediating. Shen Yu saw that my expression was wrong. What's wrong? What happened? I hurriedly said, nothing. I'm going home. He insisted on accompanying me back but was rejected by me. Shen Yu grew up in a warm and loving environment. He couldn't imagine how bad my original family was. I booked a bullet train ticket overnight and went back. My mother and sister-in-law were both lying in the hospital. The little niece just learned to walk and carefully walked to her mother, but was kicked away by my sister-in-law. Good for nothing, stay away from me. Ching-Ching was kicked and fell but didn't cry or make a fuss. She just sat on the side aggrievedly. When my mother saw me coming, she immediately cried out, "Daughter, you finally came." Mom was almost bullied to death by this bitch. My sister-in-law glared at her viciously. You shameless old thing, how dare you say that about me? It turned out that not long after I left home, my mother hooked up with an old man through the opportunity of square dancing and secretly got a marriage certificate with him. Now she is helping the old man take care of his grandson. My sister-in-law was angry and went to make trouble several times. Thus, the two had a big fight and were admitted to the hospital. My mother was righteous, that's a grandson. Even if not biological, it's still a grandson. She secretly got the marriage certificate without telling me, for fear that I would stop her. If it were in the previous life, I would definitely interfere. But now I just want to stand aside and watch. I looked at the old man on the side. He was holding a bag of cheap lotus root starch and standing in front of the hospital bed. Shufan, I think you're not very serious. Let's go home and recuperate. The eldest grandson is about to have winter vacation. You have to cook for him. I looked at the medical record that said there was a crack in the calf bone and multiple soft tissue contusions all over the body. It was recommended to be hospitalized for half a month for observation. The old man really didn't care about her life or death. Unexpectedly, my mother immediately said, "Okay, I also think my body is fine. There's no need to spend this money on hospitalization." Saying that, she shouted at the doctor that she wanted to be discharged from the hospital. When my sister-in-law heard this, she scolded loudly. You are being a grandma for someone else's child who has no blood relation. Why don't you know to look at your own granddaughter? My mother held her neck high and defended. When I take care of the grandson for them, there will be a son to send me off in the future. What are you? Then she said to me, and you, Mom spent a lot of money on this hospitalization. You have to pay. My sister-in-law gritted her teeth in hatred. In the entire ward, only the old man beamed with joy, ready to take the free nanny home to serve the eldest grandson. Wait a moment. I walked up to the old man and my mother. Uncle Chen, it costs at least 5,000 or 6,000 yuan to hire an aunt outside for a month. My mother takes care of your grandson. You should pay for this medical expense. The old man looked embarrassed and muttered in a low voice. I have no money. My sister-in-law immediately sat up from the bed. You have a monthly pension of 3,000 yuan. Don't think we don't know. The old man was a retired teacher in the town. He was good at sweet talk and just deceived ignorant old ladies like my mother. Uncle Chen, this is not right. My mother has no guarantee with you. You were at least a people's teacher before. You can't do such a thing of getting free labor. My few words made him unable to step down. The old man had no choice but to obediently pay the money. Unexpectedly, my mother was so obsessed with love that while scolding me for being heartless, she also scolded my sister-in-law as a bitch who only sows discord. After saying that, she angrily followed the old man home. After this incident, I realized that the big bomb of my original family would explode sooner or later. And I'm about to get married to Shen Yu soon. I don't want to cause any trouble at this critical moment. Sure enough, that night after my mother served the old man's family, she came to me. I received the gifts sent by the in-laws a few days ago. I heard that the marriage has been settled. How much is the bride price? How much was given? I asked in return, what about the dowry? How much are you going to prepare? She snorted coldly, I have no money. I imitated her tone, I have no money either. I don't plan to ask for the bride price either. The wedding will be simple. I don't plan to invite relatives from my hometown. If you want to come, you can. It doesn't matter if you don't. Knowing that the Shen family was rich, she immediately smiled and said, this is not what I mean. How could I not come when my daughter gets married? Then she took out a pair of gold earrings from the cabinet. Mom has prepared the gold for you. Looking at this pair of gold earrings no larger than sesame seeds, I secretly laughed in my heart. In the previous life, I was lying on the hospital bed dying. My mother ransacked all the valuable jewelry on me and then calculated how much money these jewels could be sold for. In her eyes, I was just a tool for making money. This gold earring no larger than I discharge, you'd better keep it yourself. She was stunned for a moment, and then her tone hardened. Don't think I have to beg you now. Your Uncle Chen is at least an educated person. After I follow him, my life will get better and better in the future. Saying that, she ignored the injury on her leg and went back to cook for her cheap grandson. My sister-in-law snorted. How many of the second marriages are sincere? Let's see how long she can be complacent. Ching was hungry and shouted loudly. My sister-in-law impatiently kicked her. Good for nothing, go away. The small body curled up into a ball, and a pair of eyes looked at me aggrievedly. Aunt, hungry. Remembering the previous life, I worked hard to earn money to provide her with food and education. I never let her go hungry. I did my best to raise my niece to a 985 university. In the end, she turned against me, took away my property and went to find her mother. So at this moment, I have no pity in my heart and turn my head coldly. Children are the best at reading people's expressions. Their mother doesn't care, and their aunt is indifferent. She looked at my elder brother's black and white photo with red eyes and mumbled, Dad, in her mouth. My sister-in-law was even more annoyed when she saw this and slapped her hard. Keep yelling all day. Be careful that I sew your mouth shut. This time, Ching dared not speak anymore. After dealing with the family affairs, I returned to the provincial capital. The first thing I did was to withdraw all my savings and bought a small house in the provincial capital with Shen Yu. When writing the name, I repeatedly requested that only Shen Yu's name be written. He was very surprised. Aren't you afraid of having no guarantee? With bitterness in my heart, I confessed, as long as I have a little money under my name, it will definitely be calculated by my mother in the end. Between marriage and family, I bet on marriage. Shen Yu felt sorry for me, and I never knew you had such a hard life alone. Come to think of it, I worked like an ox and a horse in the previous life and ended up with a tragic death. This life is only for my own calculation. Anyway, life is getting better and better. Because I kept a low profile, didn't ask for bride price, didn't ask for adding my name to the house, and simplified the wedding, Shen's parents were rather embarrassed. My parents-in-law are reasonable people and compensated me a lot for the 3 gold items. These things were all stored in the bank safe. Because they are not obvious assets, others can't calculate even if they want to. On the wedding day, my mother came, with Uncle Chen and that cheap grandson. She was really affectionate, calling grandson one after another, and led him over to toast me. Come on, how? This is your aunt. Your aunt's family is rich. Call her and kowtow. Let your aunt and uncle give you big red envelopes. The little boy immediately knelt down and kowtowed to me. Shen Yu wanted to take the red envelope, but I stopped him. This was my mother's test of obedience. She wanted to test my attitude on this happy day. Once this red envelope was given, it proved that I recognized this nephew. In the future, during festivals and celebrations, exams and promotions, the money would be sent out like flowing water and couldn't be recovered. So we can't start this. Mom, are you confused? I only have Ching Ching as my niece. Where did this nephew come from? When my sister-in-law heard this, she immediately became energetic. Yes, Mom, are you confused? Your own granddaughter is here. Saying that, she pushed her emaciated daughter over, forming a sharp contrast with the chubby boy. For a moment, everyone's eyes gathered over. My mother lost face and immediately led the cheap grandson away. After this small farce, the wedding went smoothly. Shen Yu secretly stuffed a red envelope to me. Look at how thin your niece is. Let's give some money. I firmly said, money is not okay. I can buy food and supplies. My sister-in-law is greedy. Even if given more money, it will go into her pocket. After marriage, I stayed and worked in the provincial capital. My mother tried every means to inquire about my salary and property under my name, and asked me for money in various names from time to time. Every time she asked, I sent her the balance of my empty bank card. I only went back for 2 days during festivals and celebrations. Usually, I didn't go back, and I firmly didn't let Shen Yu go back either. Occasionally, I sent some food and school supplies to Ching Ching. After she started school, I bought some books for her. Unexpectedly, under this kind of small favor and charity, my niece was even more grateful to me. Because she never felt much warmth from her mother, and my concern for her from time to time as an aunt, she remembered it all in her heart. Sure enough, as the old saying goes, a great favor is like a great enmity. I was too good to her in the previous life, so she took it for granted that everything of mine was hers. This life she has nothing. With a little favor, she is grateful. People, sometimes are just so despicable. In the 5th year of marriage, I gave birth to my own child. My mother made an excuse that she was busy taking care of the grandson and didn't come to the provincial capital to see me. Yes, she started to take care of Uncle Chen's second grandson. She was diligent in someone else's family like an old maid but got sick all over herself. She often had to go to the hospital for medical treatment, and the money left by my elder brother was almost spent. On the contrary, Uncle Chen still went out to do square dancing every day, and his female partners changed one after another. He came home like a master and just asked for food and drink. Anyway, there was a free nanny to serve him. Why not use it for free? I hired a confinement nurse to take care of the child. With Shen Yu's care, there was no annoying thing during the entire confinement period, and life became more and more comfortable. After the confinement period, my sister-in-law came to the provincial capital with Ching Ching to find me. She asked for money as soon as she opened her mouth. Sister, you also know that my life is difficult. The 60,000 yuan was spent long ago. The child has to go to school. I really have no choice but to come and ask you for help. Her meaning was very straightforward. She wanted to leave Ching Ching to study here with me. You are in the provincial capital with a good school district. I must be relieved to leave the child with you. Now transfer the household registration, and she can be in the 1st grade next year. Then she looked at Shen Yu. Brother-in-law is so nice. There must be no objection, right? Before Shen Yu could speak, I coldly said, I don't agree. When buying the house, my name wasn't added. Even if you transfer the household registration, Ching Ching can't study here. Besides, this is your child. Why should I raise it? My parents-in-law were initially hesitant and didn't know how to refuse. Unexpectedly, I firmly refused, and they immediately felt relieved. My sister-in-law was just a rogue attitude. If you don't raise this child, then I'll abandon her. Anyway, 6 years have passed, and I have no money to get. I sneered, okay, then abandon her. See if the Women's Federation will come to you tomorrow. The crime of abandonment is punishable by imprisonment. In the previous life, she was sure that I was soft-hearted and dared to leave. This life, I don't buy this. She saw that I was neither soft nor hard to deal with, so she grabbed the child and started slapping her. It's all because I gave birth to you, this good-for-nothing. If it weren't for you, my life wouldn't be so miserable. If you died, I could remarry and live a good life earlier. You, this burden, just die and go away. Ching Ching neither cried nor made a fuss, just endured her mother's slaps. It seemed that she was used to it. In the previous life, I didn't even dare to touch her with a finger. I held her in my palm for fear that she would be wronged. This life, in the hands of her biological mother, she tasted the bitterness and naturally knew the meaning of human life being as insignificant as grass. In the end, my parents-in-law couldn't stand it and stopped her. She's still a child. You beating and scolding like this will cause psychological harm to the child. My sister-in-law didn't care. I gave birth to her. I can beat and scold as I want. Saying that, she kicked her daughter hard again. I saw that the drama was enough. If she continued to make a fuss, she might start to threaten with death. Sister-in-law, don't play the hard luck trick in front of me. My attitude is very clear. The child is yours and my elder brother's. It's not my turn as a younger sister to raise her. I don't care how you make trouble in our hometown. If you dare to bother me again, don't blame me for being impolite. She was intimidated by my momentum and said sheepishly, Sister, we are all family. Why do you have to be so decisive? I smiled and said slowly, Sister-in-law, I know you recently hooked up with a local boss who does the wood business and are anxious to remarry and want to abandon Ching. But you have found the wrong person. I won't take over. If you come to me again, I have a way to prevent you from remarrying. Having said such decisive words, she was too embarrassed to stay any longer and could only shut up angrily. Before leaving, I called my niece to my side. Ching, it's your mother who was cruel and didn't want you. Aunt has no way to raise you either. But if you can successfully be admitted to university, I can pay the tuition for you. However, when you work in the future, you still have to return the money to me. She nodded as if she understood but not really. I know that this niece is smart and is born to be a good student. That's why in the previous life, I devoted myself to supporting her studies and she was admitted to a 985 university. But this life may not be the same. The reason why I am willing to pay for her is just to repay my elder brother's kindness. After all, the money for my high school and university studies in those years was earned by my elder brother working hard outside. Although I was uncomfortable in my heart and couldn't be close to my niece, I was still willing to pay for her studies. Ching looked at me with red eyes. Aunt, no one likes me. Only you are the best to me. I didn't speak, and my heart was calm. My sister-in-law took her daughter back and soon remarried and left, abandoning the child. Ching was taken over by the village committee and began her hard life. Shen Yu softened his heart several times and mentioned, should we bring your niece to our home? We can afford to raise one more child. The educational resources in the provincial capital are good, and it's more convenient for her to study. I rejected coldly. After several times, he also understood my attitude and stopped talking. Regarding this niece, I cared about her indifferently and sent some money back from time to time. 9-year compulsory education didn't cost much effort and money, so I didn't need to care too much. But as I expected in reality, this life without my painstaking cultivation, Ching wasted her studies early. She didn't even get into an ordinary high school and dropped out of vocational high school after 2 years. She cried and knelt down in front of me, begging me to give her another chance. I said regretfully, Ching, it's not that Aunt doesn't give you a chance. Aunt promised you that as long as you can be admitted, I will do everything to support you in your studies. She burst into tears and told me how difficult her years had been. Her mother remarried early, and her grandmother only cared about taking care of other people's grandsons. She grew up eating food from various families. Only I was willing to give her some money from time to time. I shifted all the blame to my sister-in-law and my mother. All these are your mother and your grandmother's faults. If she didn't remarry that year, you would definitely be able to be admitted to university now. And your grandmother, she would rather take care of other people's grandsons than look at her own granddaughter. There was all hatred in Ching's eyes. And I didn't help her in the end. I just gave her some money and let her go to work in the south. Since she can't study well, then go and experience the hardships of society. The electronics factory is her final destination. Over the years, I gradually understood a truth. A handful of rice nourishes gratitude, a load of rice nourishes enmity. Don't be too good to a person, otherwise, it will only invite hatred. Just like my mother, who worked like an ox and a horse in the Chen family for more than 10 years. A few years ago, old man Chen died, and the 2 grandsons of the Chen family grew up. The Chen family discussed and drove my mother out of the house overnight. She was still shouting in the Chen family that she was the elder of this family, but was scolded harshly by the other party. Not only were her things thrown out of the door, but even the 2 grandsons she brought up with her own hands also looked on coldly. After being exploited as free labor for more than 10 years, she got nothing. Finally, when she was old and weak, she was kicked out. She came to me crying and wanted to rely on me. I learned from the Chen family and firmly refused to let her in. Helplessly, she had to go back to the countryside alone to live on her old age. She lives on a few hundred yuan of government subsidies every month, lives in a house that leaks when it's windy and rainy, and sighs every day. Once I was kind-hearted and went back to see her. Her hair was grey, her eyes were almost half-blind. Lying on the dilapidated bed, she propped up half of her body and looked at me. At that moment, I didn't have the pleasure of getting revenge. There was only an almost absurd feeling in my heart. She cried and called my name, and also called her dead son, accusing her fate of being lonely and helpless all her life. "Mom, you didn't say that when you were taking care of Uncle Chen's grandson." She started to curse old man Chen again, saying that he was a heartless dog. She followed him for so many years. Unexpectedly, she was kicked out by all his children. "Daughter, Mom is relying on you." I smiled, dropped some alimony and left without looking back. Not long after Qingqing went to work in the south, she sent me a message saying that she was pregnant. She was quite calculating and hooked up with the boss of an electronics factory. Relying on her youth, she wanted to have a son for the boss. Shen Yu asked me if I wanted to persuade her. Young girls can't calculate as well as these middle-aged men. She's just being used as a reproductive machine. I threw the phone aside. Good words are hard to persuade those who are doomed. It's no use to persuade. Shen Yu didn't believe it. He made several phone calls but was scolded by Qingqing in return. "Uncle, do you not want me to have a good life? My life is so comfortable now. I don't have to work, and I have a lot of money to spend every month. When the child is born, I can also get a house." Shen Yu was speechless. He didn't know that once a girl from the bottom climbed up and tasted the free candy, she wouldn't want to suffer anymore. Over the years, he should have seen through what kind of people my original family is. Not caring and letting it go is the most correct way. Once you get involved in other people's causes and effects, it's like getting stained with shit in this life and it's hard to wash clean. So I won't say anything and let the other party fend for themselves. That boss rented a luxurious apartment for her. After hearing the news, my sister-in-law immediately went there, insisting shamelessly on staying by her daughter's side to serve. Qingqing hated her in her heart and didn't want to see her. After a big fight between the mother and daughter, they parted unhappily. Soon, Qingqing gave birth to a son for the benefactor. The happy days didn't last long before the benefactor's wife came to the door, led people to beat her fiercely and took the child away. The benefactor didn't have much affection for her anyway. He just wanted to have a child by her because he took a fancy to her young and beautiful body. After the son was born, he took this opportunity to dump her. Qingqing was greatly stimulated. When she called me, she was incoherent and couldn't say a word for a long time. This ending was also within my expectation. She was physically and mentally traumatized and had no choice but to return to that small mountain village. Later, when my mother died, I went back to handle the funeral. I found out that Qingqing had become engaged to an old bachelor from the neighboring village. The other party didn't mind her past and only hoped to have another son. This year, she was only 19 years old. I looked at her and remembered her at the age of 19 in the previous life, studying in the first year of a 985 university. Full of youth and with a bright future. Those good endings were all nourished by me holding her up and with every bit of my effort and hard work. This life, she lost me as her supporter. So she was like a flower rotten in the mud. Before it had a chance to bloom, it was trampled into the mud by someone with a hard kick. The old bachelor held her and said cheerfully, "Your belly must strive for me. This baby must be a son, otherwise keep giving birth until there is one." Qingqing timidly called me, "Aunt," and showed me the injuries on her arm. The old bachelor would hit her when he drank too much, and she really couldn't stand it anymore. I pretended not to see it and cautioned, "Since you got married, be obedient. Don't always think about running outside." After the funeral, I returned to the provincial capital. Then I changed all my phone numbers and cut off all contact information. From now on, nothing that happens in that mountain village has anything to do with me. Only occasionally can I still hear some news that Ching gave birth to 2 daughters for that bachelor. Because she didn't give birth to a son, the other party imprisoned her at home and forced her to give birth to a son. Later, I heard that because of the long-term imprisonment, her mental state was not good. The Women's Federation came to mediate several times but was helpless. After all, the mountain village is poor and beyond reach. Shen Yu no longer persuaded me to go back and have a look. He also understood that once anyone wants to step into this quagmire-like family to save the people in the quagmire, they will surely be pulled into the abyss together with the other party. These people will climb up by stepping on your shoulders and use you as a stepping stone. Once they climb out of the quagmire, they will kick you away regardless of your life or death. So in this life, I chose to stay away from this quagmire and my life is getting better and better. My daughter is smart and sometimes she would look up and ask me, "Mom, aren't we really going back to Grandma's house to have a look?" My hand gently brushed the broken hair on her forehead and I coaxed softly, "No. Remember, not every child in this world has a grandma's house." She nodded as if she understood but not really. Later, the news from the mountain village gradually became less. One afternoon many years later, someone called me, saying that my niece died on the night when she gave birth to her 4th child. This made the old bachelor happy because it was a son. But Ching died due to difficult labor. This year, she was 22 years old. Counting the time, girls of the same age should have just graduated from university and were at the age of looking for jobs. Because of her daughter's death, my sister-in-law blackmailed the old bachelor heavily. The old bachelor, because he got a son, gave the money very readily and neatly. This whole thing seemed to be a happy ending. The old bachelor held his son and went home. He didn't even collect Ching's body. In the end, it was the hospital that paid for the cremation. I listened to these things coldly and said nothing. Everyone in this world has causes and effects. If you get involved in someone else's cause, you have to bear the other party's consequence. This life, I don't get involved in their causes. So the bitter fruit naturally has to be borne by themselves.